Hello, this is George again. I'm sure you are taking some really interesting nuggets from the previous class, where we talked about branding. We tried to give a definition to branding, and then we went further to look at the history and why should you even consider branding in itself. And I think that was an interesting class. I know you agree with me, so come on, put that in the comments, that you agree that we had an interesting conversation around branding, okay? For this session, we're going to be talking about branding assets and touch points. Now, just like building a brand, we're talking about building a brand. There's a very interesting concept in branding, which is called branding archetype. Now, the archetype is the makeup of the brand. It's how all the assets of the brand come together to form a personality. Okay, so, you start a business and you think a business does not have a personality. It actually does have a personality. Your business it's a person. It's like a person in itself. It's very, very interesting. There are about 12 of them. The 12 archetypes are explorer, the sage, the jester, the outlaw, the hero, the creator, the ruler, the lover, the magician, the everyman, the caregiver, and the innocent. Okay, so these are archetypes. These are all the archetypes, that, research has taught us over time that make up branding. So you think about your brand can be an explorer, your brand can be a sage, your brand can be a jester. It really just depends on how you build the brand. So what are the things that influence the kind of archetype that you eventually have? What is an asset? An asset is anything that is useful, valuable, anything that is useful or valuable, a useful or valuable thing or person, that's an asset. So ideally, you think about how when you're doing business, you have assets and you have liabilities. Not like the liabilities are not useful, but the assets will naturally appreciate or can still give you value even when you're exiting whatever transaction it might be. I don't want to go into all of that details, but yes. So every brand has some assets as well, which, you would consider very important in building the archetype of your brand. So you have, for instance, a name. You can't have a nameless brand. It's impossible to have a nameless brand. Your brand must have a name. Okay, so you have a name. The name is maybe Apple. So at that point, Apple means nothing because it's just a fruit to all of us. Okay, it's been existing before even the laptops were made. Okay, but they chose that name, Apple Computers, and that was their name, and they went ahead to design a logo for it, which has changed over the years. Sometimes Google wakes up and changes an element on their logo. You won't even know. You won't notice, but logos have changed over the years, but they are an important asset to your brand. So your brand must have a name. Your brand must have a logo. Your brand must have its colors. It's important for your brand to have its colors, really. In the bid to become creative, a lot of people just slam all sorts of colors across their brands. Okay, your brand must be able to be identified by a color. Think about this for a moment. There are some campaigns that you just see a yellow billboard or something yellow, and you automatically start thinking MTN. Okay, that's because they have owned that color. Or you see something in the financial space and you see orange. You have no doubt that that is GT. Anybody that is trying to do it is a me too. It's somebody who is copying that identity which they have built with that color. Okay, so your name, remember, is an asset. Your logo is an asset. Your color is an asset. The next one is your slogan. In fact, you must copyright your slogan because it should be yours. It's a thing that you own. It's something that you use to trade. Okay, so different brands have their slogans. They come up with slogans and all of that. And that's what you also, it also informs the kind of archetype that you have. Another one is the brand personality, which is your tone and your voice. When you're speaking, as a brand, you're writing posts on social media, you're doing billboards and all of that. There must be a certain voice, a tone that we must be able to discern when we interact with your communication materials. That forms your personality. Another one is your product. What kind of products are you trading? So for instance, you sell phones. If that's what your company does, you manufacture and sell phones, then it also influences the kind of archetype that you should have. Because of the natural growth and the adventure and sojourn into technological exploration, we would need you to be on the side of an explorer. Or we need you to be on the side of, one of those other archetypes that seeks to know so much or develop so much, But imagine if you're in the finance space, you either have to be a sage or a hero, because you're trying to teach people, educate people on how to use your services to gain financial freedom, or you're trying to save people from, emergencies by providing like payday loans and all of those things. It just naturally, your product naturally positions you, and defines the kind of archetype that you would have. Another thing is the missions, the goals. Somebody wants to build humanity, a space for humanity in Mars. That naturally defines the kind of personality his brand will have, the kind of archetype that his brand will have. So these things, they're assets. However, they influence the way our brands are perceived in the market space. So for instance, you have your marketing approach. How do you approach your marketing? You approach your marketing, do you approach your marketing from a creative point of view, from a conservative point of view, or from an adventurous, edgy point of view? It depends. It really depends on your strategy and what kind of archetype you're trying to achieve. There's a very interesting archetype, which is the jester. Okay, the jester, of course, you can tell, is a joker. So there are people that their marketing is always jokes. They get people to laugh, they get people to put comments, and everybody's just laughing up and down, social media, or seeing their billboard and they're laughing. That archetype is a jester. And that is built from their marketing approach. So you'll find that they jump on trends that are funny and all of those things. Well, these are all brand assets. Another one is the founder. You see, the founder has a huge influence on the way the brand is perceived. So if the founder is seen as somebody who is noble, who is adding value, who is creating value to society, the founder is appreciated, the founder is celebrated, and naturally the brand will be. Okay, so I give you a case in point. One popular African billionaire recently reduced the price of diesel, and that influenced the entire market. And corporations and organizations started paying less, for what they were paying a lot more for. That influences the way the brand is perceived. Now, that archetype will naturally be the hero if you were following what I've been saying, And so the next one will be your communication channels. By the channels you choose, we can already tell what kind of archetype you have. For instance, if you're seen always on TikTok, we cannot see you as a sage. If you're always on Snapchat, we can't look at you as a sage. We look at you as someone that is more of, maybe an everyman, or not even an everyman, maybe an outlaw, or a creator. Those kind of archetypes would naturally be from your communication channel. So these brand assets, which I went through with you, the name, the logo, the color, the slogan, the brand personality, which is the tone and the voice, your product, your mission and goals, your marketing approach, the founder, the communication channels you employ, all of this will form the archetype of the brand. And I gave you various archetypes. You can take your time and just look through them. The explorer, the sage, the jester, the outlaw, the hero, the creator, the ruler, the lover, the magician, the everyman, the caregiver, and the innocent. I would like to give you an assignment today. Pick any industry of your choice. Look at the 12. You can just Google this. What are the 12 brand archetypes? And then pick one particular industry and fill in each archetype with one brand. Okay, that will help you understand how to arrive at the archetypes itself. So remember, I was telling you about intentions and perception. Okay, so as a brand, this is a reality that we struggle with in the industry. When we talk about branding, you mean something else. And so you design your archetype, you say, I want to be a ruler, or I want to be an explorer, or I want to be a jester, any of those archetypes that you have chosen. And then you deliberately and intently design your brand to fit that mold. But guess what? Somebody is out there in the marketplace and your brand means something entirely different to that person. I want to introduce to you a factor that we deal with in branding. It's a coefficient that when you're planning your branding strategy, you must keep a place for it. It's called noise. That thing called noise is what distorts the intention of a brand and changes the way we perceive a brand. Okay, so noise can be anything. It can be a previous experience. So for instance, a place calls themselves the home of luxury, and then I walk into this certain home of luxury and then I find a roach on the floor. That roach that I found on the floor has automatically distorted the definition, the meaning, my perception of the home of luxury. It automatically means the home of roaches. So every time I see the home of luxury anywhere, I interpret it as the home of roaches. I don't know if you get what I'm saying, guys. This is very important when you're planning your branding and your archetype. You must consider all the variables that can go wrong, everything that can possibly change the identity of your brand. Some is not even their own personal experiences, it's their friends' experiences. Some people is even their experiences with your competitors' products. For some, it might even be, the price of your product. It might just not make them value your product, maybe because you're too low in price. For some, it might just be that they can't relate with the language you're speaking. So there's some communication materials that are above the head of the target audience. So you're talking to people in a particular setting, and your language does not fit what they are used to speaking in that space. And so as you're planning your branding, as you're trying to design what your brand will mean, what your brand will look like, what your brand should feel like to others, as you're planning all of that, you must bear in mind that a certain factor, the enemy, which is called the noise, can slip in and somehow distort what your brand will be. And you must have strategies for recovery. For instance, there's a very popular crisis story that rocked Nigeria early I think it was in the 2000s, about a particular food brand, and someone claimed to have died from poisoning because of that brand. And we had to come up with a response strategy, how we're going to manage that crisis, how we're going to make sure that the story was, the story was investigated, because at the end of the day, we found out that that was not the case. So it took a long time to convince people that the food brand is safe, and all the health and safety, things that were supposed to be done were done. But, in all our branding, we were the family-friendly food brand. We did not consider that there could be noise that will intercept and distort the true meaning of the brand. So that's where intentions and perception comes in. You might intend something else in the market, but the market perceives something else. And usually the major cause for that is noise. You got to deal with the noise in your branding.